Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good evening, friends. I'm recording this on a Saturday night because at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow, we hit the road for Christmas in Myrtle Beach. Now, my kids grew up loving going to Christmas at Myrtle Beach. So we're going back down memory lane. It's been about 12 years since we had Christmas at Myrtle. Now, if you're new to Your College Bound Kid, our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. And our approach is to do real deep dives on college-related topics. We have 8 co-hosts from all types of different backgrounds. We have a chief enrollment officer. We have another admission officer. We have multiple people that have been on what we could say both sides of the desk, counseling side and the admission side, and everyone's a true professional. And we see ourselves in partnership with you, our listening family, to get the word out there because there's a lot of noise out there when it comes to college admissions, and we're trying to debunk and counteract that noise. Now, friends, Your College Bound Kid just went up on Audible. It's been now maybe 3 weeks, and one way you could help us is to get the word out there is you can give us a positive review on Audible. It helps others who use reviews to find us. This week, a Philadelphia listener wrote in to say, I'm going to give you an Audible review, and it made my day. We have over 300 reviews on Apple, but we really could use some more reviews on Audible and Spotify. So if you're willing to do that for us, we'd love for you to put up a review. Now, for today's episode, we had 2 questions from listeners that came in through Speakpike that were very similar. They both asked about how colleges look at foreign language courses in high school. So I'm going to answer those, but before I do, I'm going to share something that happened to me on my visit to the College of William and Mary on December 3rd. And the thing I'm going to share is very relevant to both of the questions that came in this week. Then we've got a brand new interview, and it's with Dr. Lisa Ruff and Erin Lewellen. And friends, I learned so much while editing this interview, and I really think you're going to learn a lot from this interview. It's a different kind of interview, and that's one thing that makes it awesome. If you have kids or if you work with kids, they are members of Generation Z, which the experts say are students under 26. And it's important that you understand your own kids or the students you work with. And Erin Lewellen's an expert on Generation Z. So in this interview, she actually debunks some very prevalent and persistent and pernicious myths about Generation Z. I found Erin to be bright, insightful, someone who really challenged me in my own thinking. It's a 3-parter that'll run for the next 3 Mondays. Friends, if you're not getting the Your College Bound Kid newsletter, it's a monthly newsletter that goes out in the middle of the month. And one thing we do in there is we send links to articles that discuss very important topics in the world of college admissions. If we had a daily podcast, these are the things that we would talk about in our, don't get any ideas, friends, that we're not going there. But these are the kinds of things we would talk about if we had a daily podcast. I'm just going to give you an example of some of the articles that we posted in the December newsletter, which went out last week. And all you do is click the link. It takes you right into the article. We make sure that none of the articles are behind a paywall. So one is on UT Austin's auto admit rule and how it has raised the stakes for applicants and made it so much harder to get into UT Austin. That's a very deep dive and a great article that we may visit some of these in the news section, but you guys have been sending us so many great questions through Speakpipe that, we no longer do those every single week. Another article that was in that newsletter was how universities can prepare graduates for an AI-driven world. That was in there. There was another one on liberal arts colleges must embed career services into their campus life. There was another article about how U.S. News and World Report's college rankings need to do away with the peer assessment component. There was another article on why college freshman enrollment is declining and what that could mean for students. There was another article on 5 trends that are defining higher ed enrollment. And finally, there was an article on despite public perception and for the first time in decades, college acceptance rates are going up. So if you want to get the newsletter, just go to yourclassmindkit.com. You can't miss it. One of those pop-ups will pop up right away. Just put your email in, and you'll get it once a month free directly into your email. All right, friends, let's dive in. The next 2 voices you're going to hear are from 2 of our listeners who have questions about course selection, especially when it comes to foreign language courses.
Hi guys, longtime listener here. Really love all the content you provide. I have a question about transcripts. Looking at my high school junior students' transcript, they have several courses listed from middle school with grades, including geometry and foreign language. Do colleges take these classes into account? I'm thinking mostly about foreign language, as my child will have taken 4 years of the same language after junior year, if you count the 8th grade year. But not sure if that technically counts as 4 years, especially in the eyes of the highly rejective colleges. My student is weighing taking an AP foreign language class senior year versus some other APs. They are likely going into a STEM major if that helps. Thanks so much.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for all that you do. I'm a regular listener and I've never missed an episode. I'm the one who had to listen at double time when I first discovered your podcast, and I had to do that to catch up. I had a question about course selection. I know the most selective schools want 4 years of the same language, and I'm not sure how flexible that is. For example, what if a student isn't necessarily shooting for these top tier schools and would like to take maybe 3 years of a language to make room for another career-oriented elective like journalism or green engineering, something like that? I know schools are always say they want to encourage students to pursue their own interests, but I know that's a balance with taking a typical course load so the student's still competitive with others in the applicant pool. Any advice you have about this would be wonderful. And once again, thanks again. The podcast is outstanding, and I share it with everyone that I know.
Friends, I'm going to start out with a story that will partially answer some of the questions you just heard. So I have visited the College of William and Mary 4 times in Williamsburg, Virginia. I visited in 1999, in 2001, and in 2005. But one of the reasons I wanted to go back is because 2005 is now 19 years ago. So I was there December 3rd this year. And the last time I was there in 2005, after my tour, I met with the admission officer that did the info session before the tour when I got back from tour. And that AO expressed frustration about getting so many applications from students that she knew could be successful, but they didn't take the right high school courses and therefore they were not admissible. So when I got back from my tour this time and I met with an admission officer, I was thinking in the back of my mind, let's follow up on this conversation about curriculum and curriculum errors and curriculum choices that students make that make it harder to get into the College of William and Mary. So I fired away. I said, what are the most common mistakes you're seeing students make in their course selection? And before I even got the words out of my mouth, she was ready for me without hesitation. She said 3 things. Number 1, they don't take physics, chemistry, and biology. Number 2, they don't take calculus. She said a lot of them will get to pre-calc in 11th, and then they jump to stats in 12th. And she said, we don't need AP Calc, but we want to see some calc on that transcript. And then the third thing she said was, they don't get to level 4 of a foreign language. So anytime someone says that, my response is always this. So what if they take Spanish 1 and 2 and 7th and 8th, and then they take level 3 and level 4 in high school? Is that okay? And she was like, absolutely yes, as long as they get to level 4. Now, I don't want your takeaway from this to be, great, now I know what the standard is. The truth is, this answer will vary tremendously from school to school. And in general, the more selective the college, the more persnickety they will be. But there's even exceptions there, because some colleges really expect you to just lay that foundation in the 5 solids: math, English, science, social studies, foreign languages, and others allow a little bit more curricular freedom, even amongst highly selective schools. I personally do find a lot of schools will count your middle school languages as years. I hear that more often than I hear that they don't really count. But I also have other selective schools that want you to have at least 3 years in high school. In other words, they don't like the idea of you not taking any foreign languages at all in 11th and 12th, even if you did, come in with courses already in middle school. But this is completely case to case, completely case to case. I also don't want you to think that if you don't take those courses at college in William and Mary, you're completely toast. Because the rep did say there are still times that we admit kids that make those 3 mistakes, but you just made it much more difficult to get admitted. So I don't want you to think that's like complete black and white denial automatically. I don't want to imply that, because that's not what I was told. But they're like, boy, gee, I wish this student would have done this, because now it's going to be that much harder for me to admit them or advocate for them. Now, I also don't want you to think that those 3 things I said are the big 3 curriculum errors. Those were the 3 William and Mary said. And now, those 3 didn't surprise me. I hear those 3 a lot. But I just don't want you to take away to be, those are the big 3. Now I know them. But those are very common. I don't know if you remember this, but regular listeners may recall Julie and I talking about curriculum challenges and talking about the science trinity, physics, chem, bio. And Julie is sharing, when I read at both Emory and Haverford, that was the absolute expectation, chem, physics, bio, at both of those schools. So it is pretty common for that, and an expectation that be on the transcript. So I would say those 3 things and one other curriculum mistake I see frequently noted, and that is taking your foot off the gas pedal in the senior year. And I'm seeing more of that, because it's especially true here in Georgia, but a lot of these schools are having students do tracks in their senior year, like you go on the technology track or you go on the healthcare track. And it's great because they pair you up with doctor's offices and there's a lot of exposure to the field. But what some students are doing is they're looking at how many credits do I need to graduate, as opposed to the mindset that selective schools are going to have, which is we expect your rigor to increase every year. Your senior year should be your most demanding. And the mindset that they're going to have is we're going to be harder than your high school. So a good gauge for us as to whether you can handle our rigor is, did you increase your rigor every year, and were you able to be successful with that rigor? When I interviewed Karen Christoph, admission dean at Colorado College and VP there, I interviewed on the topic of how colleges read a transcript, and this was the error that she pointed out she sees so frequently. Taking an elective instead of a core academic class in the senior year in a math and English, a social studies, a science, a foreign language. So that's another common error. Now, there are a couple caveats that are really, really important that you hear as a counter to what I've been saying. One is your student's going to be seen through the context of the opportunities they have at their school. Now, I'd say at the most selective schools, a lot of the kids they'll be competing with will have gone outside of what their high school has to offer if they're at a school that doesn't offer that much at their high school. Because we're in a day and age now where there's a lot of things available outside of the school. But there still will be an evaluation through the prism of what your school has to offer and what the higher achievers curriculum looks like from your school. So that's important. The other thing that's extremely important is that your student finds a balance between rigor and living a balanced life. A student should not feel overwhelmed. A student should not be taking rigorous courses and not doing well in them because they have to take rigorous courses. And every year I have one or two people that make this mistake. You know, you look at the transcript and you don't see high grades and you probe a little bit more and they're like, well, I know I needed to take demanding classes. Not if you're not doing well in them, not if you don't have good mental health, not if you don't have work-life balance, not if the student doesn't want to take the courses. So there's a balancing act here. All right, now let's look at some of the other questions that our listeners sent in that I haven't addressed already. Does a student need to take 4 years of the same foreign language for highly selective schools? Institutions vary tremendously on this. I mean, I'm talking about the top of the food chain selectivity. For example, Harvard and Princeton, they tend to be much less flexible and more rigid from my experience than Yale and Dartmouth. I know the anonymous listener wanted to know, aren't they interested in you kind of pursuing what you want to pursue? Well, to an extent, as long as you have that foundation. So the bottom line for this is talk to the schools. A lot of them will list it on the website, their curricular expectations. And if you don't see it there, this is an email that admission officers love to get. Like, they're not going to be thrilled with, you sending an email in asking them, a basic question that you could look up on the internet. Something like, do you guys offer neuroscience or data science or something like that? That's not a good question. And they get those kinds of questions all the time. What kind of GPA do you need? Nails on a chalkboard on that question. Nails on a chalkboard. I'm going to have more to say about that in an upcoming episode, by the way. But I'm trying to decide between this course and that course. What would you advise? I'm interested in your school. Great question. As long as it's coming from the student, not the parent. Great question. Now let's look at another question one of the listeners asked. Do middle school grades matter? I was listening to an admission officer at one of the most selective schools in the country say, I personally have never voted against a school committee because of a 9th grade grade. So the chance that your 8th grade grades would be the reason why somebody is not admitted, extremely unlikely even at the most selective of schools. Now, do I think if they saw a couple D's or D and C, it would raise curiosity about what was going on at that time in your life? Sure. But remember, colleges read your application backwards, putting an emphasis on what's recent because that's a better predictor of who you are now. So very little weight, if any, will be on a 8th grade course from an evaluation standpoint. And once again, this can vary from school to school, depending on their academic rubric. But I can assure you, emphasis will be put on the current classes. What I see middle school opportunities like this doing, though, is setting you up to be able to take more rigor in high school and hopefully be able to be successful with that rigor. So, for example, if you don't take Algebra 1 in middle school, think about the natural sequencing. You take Algebra 1 in high school, and then depending on the school, you're either taking Alg 2 or Geo in 10th, and then you're taking the other one in 11th. So let's say it's Alg 1, Alg 2, Geometry 11th, now pre-calc in 12th. Or some schools do Alg 1, Geo, Alg 2, pre-calc. Either way, you don't get past pre-calc. And we know a lot of selective schools like to see calc. Rick Clark's on our Thursday episodes right now. He's been very clear. 97% of students coming to Georgia Tech have calculus on their transcript. 97%. In fact, he said 28,000 kids had BC Calc a couple years ago. So if you're coming in with pre-calc as your highest form of rigor and you're looking at a really competitive school, if it's holistic, it's possible you could be admitted, but highly unlikely. So what these middle school classes do is they set you up to be able to get the rigor you need to be able to be competitive if you are aspiring to more selective schools and you have that type of student. I'll tell you a story about Kara. So Harris had a very good school. She was at Westtown School, or was with Susan, pre-K through 7th. We moved to Atlanta. She attended KIPP, where I worked for 1 year, in 8th grade only. And then she applied to a private Christian school for 9th grade. She was admitted, and they put her back in Spanish 1, Algebra 1, and regular English. Now, in a non-obnoxious way, I had to be that parent to go advocate for my kid. There's no way in the world I knew that she belonged in Spanish 1, Algebra 1, or regular English. So they adjusted it. They put her in Spanish 2, they put her in geometry, and they put her in honors English. What happened in that case, this is interesting how this stuff can happen. They had a few students that had come to this private school from the school I worked with that had not done well academically. So their sense was, I don't know the rigor of that school. I mean, it was poor evaluation, to be totally honest. But the point is this. Had Karis not got into that sequence, she would have never got to calculus, and she wouldn't have gotten into Davidson College. She just wouldn't. It's a highly selective school. So, you know, your middle school can really set you up to have the rigor to be successful in high school. So that's really the value that I see to those middle school courses. Not so much that, you know, a grade there is going to hurt you 5 years later when they're making the evaluation. All right, let's transition to Lisa and her excellent interview with Erin Lewellen as we all learn more about Gen Z, students under 26.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Hi, this is Lisa, one of the co-hosts on Your College Bound Kid, and I'm very excited today to be talking with Erin Lewellen, and we are going to be talking about Generation Z and some myths that Erin is going to bust about what Generation Z is really like. Erin is the CEO of Tilting Futures, which is a nonprofit organization that provides immersive travel experiences for young people all over the globe to improve their futures as well as ours. Erin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I always like to ask people, like, how did you get to the job that you have now? I always think it's so interesting that people take often circuitous paths to where they currently sit.
Oh, definitely. I'm happy to talk about that. The work that we do at Tilting Futures is actually very personal to me. So for a long time, I was, when I was young, I grew up in rural Oregon and in a very small, tiny place. And I had this idea that the world was a bit bigger than what I was experiencing, but I wasn't quite sure how to navigate, how to get out of the bubble that I was in, which was in so many ways wonderful. I just wanted to experience something a little bit more. And these experiences that I knew about, they seemed inaccessible to me. And so went to college, went to the University of Oregon, tried to study abroad, tried to do a few things, and none of them were accessible financially for me. And then I got this opportunity right at the end of college. And that opportunity was a donor set aside a fund that if I could get an unpaid internship anywhere in the world, they would pay for me to go, get there, and to live through the duration of that internship. And so the first big city I ever lived in was Cape Town, South Africa. Cool. And it fundamentally changed my life. I interned with a nonprofit there. I lived with 4 South African women. It was 1999. It was a very intense time to be in South Africa. It was a time full of optimism. And I think living with these women really changed my idea of myself and the way I wanted to be in the world, the way I thought about the world, and it really set the foundation for what came next, which was a career that's been completely focused on social impact with young people from that moment on. So that's how I've gotten to here. I've worked in two other social impact organizations, a nonprofit called Playworks, which we grew to across the country, and a for-profit double bottom line called Revolution Foods, where we focused on healthy school lunch and grew that across the country as well. And now I'm at Tilting Futures, trying to do this the same, except for now we're growing globally, so a little different.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So, how did you come to know so much and understand so much about Generation Z?
Well, two ways. So first, I also have been a high school basketball coach for the last 20 years with my wife. So that's one way that I've gotten to know Gen Z. But the other way is that Tilting Futures serves Gen Z, and I've served thousands of young people in this age group. And we customize our programming to meet the needs of Gen Z. And so, I study what people are saying about them. I study what they're saying about themselves. I listen. The team listens. Our whole goal is to meet them where they're at and support their educational journey, which means we have to know them pretty intimately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm very fascinated by all of your knowledge about Gen Z. I live with 3 Gen Z members, 22, 17, and 13. And, I feel like I was like, well, how come I don't know about Gen Z? But I think I'm just too close. I can't see any trends because and even in, working with students as a college counselor, I'm working with individuals. So I love that you have more of a macro, meta kind of view of Gen Z, and that you're able to kind of help us understand our kids. So I think that in past conversations, you identified 5 myths about Gen Z, sort of the difference between what people say about Gen Z and what they're actually like. And I thought if it's okay with you, we could go through them one by one. And the first one is that Gen Z is just checked out. They are nihilistic. They do not care about anything. And so I'm curious to know, what your experience has been with the level of, I guess, involvement or checked inness with Gen Z that you've seen.
Yeah, well, I can't say enough about this being a complete myth. And it's backed up by some research. So not only is my personal experience that this generation is one of the most checked in generations to come before us, but also the research supports this. So McKinsey just published an insight that speaks to this, I think. And the line that jumped out at me was that in the workplace, Gen Z is demanding 3 things: purpose and accountability for who they're working for, a creation of more opportunities from people from underrepresented backgrounds, and a very rigorous set of sustainable and green practices at wherever they're working. And they report that Gen Z is doing this more than any other generation before them. And to me, this is the heart of it. You don't demand these things if you're checked out. You're actually, instead, you're just holding us to a higher standard, which I will say I appreciate. And there is an experience, though, that I think could be mistaken for nihilism or checked out. And I think this is also true, which is the scope of the challenges and the scope of information Gen Z has on those challenges. Things like the environment or climate change, for example. The scope of that problem could feel so massive that this generation has experienced what we are calling eco paralysis, where it manifests into anxiety. And I think that is where we as educators and we as support systems come in. We have to provide pathways and educational supports that help channel their desire to be plugged in and want to do something and get in the arena, so to speak. That's our role. And so if they're experiencing this paralysis, we have to look in the mirror and say, okay, what are we doing to channel some of this eagerness to be involved in meeting some of the biggest challenges of our day?
Yeah, no, I definitely could see how somebody could be paralyzed by their anxiety about so many different things that are happening right now, but the environment being one. And I mean, this is being recorded after, a couple of hurricanes, and there were floods in Spain a couple of days ago. I mean, so things are definitely changing. And I mean, I think what you're saying is Gen Z is like they're bombarded by the information, by the news about all this, but they don't feel like they know what solutions there are. And to be honest, I think prior generations have obscured those solutions purposefully, to make it really hard to figure out. So, I mean, I could totally see that being like, I don't know what to do because I feel like climate change is real and somebody else is saying that it's not. And what does that mean? That's hard. So I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, when I go back to what McKinsey published on this, is that it's not surprising that they're bringing this up in their workplace, because that's one of the places that we've done such a good job. And when I say we, I'm looking in the mirror at our generations before them. We've done a great job of ignoring some of these challenges or denying some of these challenges. And what I see as the checked in nature of this generation is they're saying, no, 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 these are real. And how are we? The solution is going to require all of us. So how are we at the place of work I'm in right now addressing it?
Yeah. And that gets to, I think, the second myth is that Gen Z just doesn't care about work. That they're lazy, they don't care, they're not checked in. But as you point out, there's all these different ways sort of around, how work is done and how work is structured that they are checked in. Yeah. And I have to say, I really admire these younger kids who can go into a workplace and say like, well, why don't we do this? Because I'm from Gen X, and it's like, well, that's just the way it's done. There's no agency, there's no, like, just like, that's the rules, follow the rules. And I'm like, well, that was stupid. Why have I spent 55 years doing that? But talk more about how Gen Z actually feels about work.
Yeah, I think that this is an interesting one. Again, every single one of these, of course, myths always have some little sort of truth that then they're kind of taken in a direction that I think blows them up into something a little bit different. I don't think that it's true that Gen Z doesn't care about work. And Deloitte recently published a good summary on how Gen Z might change the workplace. And one of the key takeaways here for me when I read this was that the prediction is that Gen Z is going to have the ability to demand greater personalization in how they move along their career journey. So what does this mean for employers? What does this mean for parents who are supporting these young people? It's really about how does their career journey is not going to look like our career journey, which our career journey looks different than the generations before us, right? Our generation does not go to work for the same organization or company for 40 years like we used to, right? We break it up. We also have people who work for themselves and contract out. That this is all new. And Gen Z is saying, I want to have more personalization in how I move through my career journey, which means I want coaching. I want extra support. I want to talk with you about my professional development. I don't want to just only put my head down, like you said before, and do my job and hope that I move into something different or new or more advanced. I actually want to have a conversation with you about my goals. And I want to work with you on what do I need to do to meet those goals. And that's that personalization piece. And that's not about a generation not wanting to work. It's about the opposite, actually. And it's about how are we thinking about how we're supporting their ability to do better work. That's the flip on that I think is really important for us to know as employers of Gen Z.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at sort of the way that a lot of corporate America is structured right now, it's really not structured in a way that would encourage employees to do their best work. And I think that, again, I'm sure like Gen Xers are probably, managers now, and it just doesn't occur to them that they could give anyone support because they don't know what that looks like. So it feels foreign. But I absolutely think that, by growing one's employees in all these kinds of personal ways, like theoretically, that should lead to more profits in the long run, right? Because you have better output, better work. But it's a real paradigm shift, I think, for the older generations to
I
think
think
like
so.
that.
I agree. And I think it really requires an ability to admit that there are better ways to do it than we've done it. And sometimes I think when you're in a position of authority, or you're in a position of, being older, which is naturally a position often of authority, you are hesitant to do that. And I think that is a relic. I think we need to be very open, especially at the rate the world is changing right now, very open to the fact that folks who are younger than us with less experience might have the best ideas.
Right, right. And they have more access to the technology. They're native in that technology that, so they might come up with things that are more advanced or better than what we could. And that's hard for people to take. But yeah, I think that I hope that lots of people listen to you talk about this and they start changing the way they treat their Gen Z employees. I think,
Thank you.
um,
The one other thing I was going to say on this, if I might, is I also think that it's important for us to understand they might also see possibilities where we don't see them.
mhm.
And I think that our approach, and when I say our, I think I'm thinking Gen X too. I'm also Gen X. Our approach of put your head down and get the work done has closed off some of the ability to see what's possible. And I think when you have a young, creative, and in many ways idealistic person in your midst, they're going to see places for possibility that you might not. The more open you are to that, the more generative they will be.
Friends, this concludes the first part of our 3-part interview. I hope you'll join us next week for part 2 of 3. On Thursday's episode, Susan and Lisa will continue their conversation about the article from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, Is Loneliness Worse Than Smoking? For college students. Hillary will join me to answer a question from Megan from Arizona. And she has a question about the ACT writing score and whether it can be submitted to show her students' strength in writing. Rick Clark from Georgia Tech is back, and he's teaching us what's the proper way to respond if you get denied, and what's the proper way to respond if you get waitlisted by a school. And we'll have the final part of Linda and Lisa's College Spotlight, breaking down DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana. Now, friends, this is our last episode before Christmas. So I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope you guys get some rest and relaxation. Hope you get to spend some quality time with your kids and your parents and your aunts and uncles and your loved ones. And I want to close with a quote. It's one of the 10 quotes I picked as my favorite quotes that I have at the start of my book, 171 Answers. And this one comes from Gary Clark, Chief Enrollment Officer at UCLA. And it's kind of related to this family time thing. So here's what Gary says. Everything you do isn't about how it looks on a college application. High school is all about getting into the right college. Your undergraduate program is all about getting into the right MBA or JD or medical school. And then you wind up in your adulthood working, or you have a family, and you look back at your life and you say, I really didn't have any fun. I didn't really get to be a kid. Gary Clark, UCLA. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode. as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.